Bible UFOs and Slavic Firebirds. Same alien craft? Imagine a picture. The sky over an ancient land suddenly splits apart, and from the clouds, illuminated by sparkling light, a colossal wheel descends, rotating with inhuman precision, shrouded in fire and mist, from which a voice emerges capable of making even the bravest warriors tremble. This is not a script for a science fiction movie or the fruit of an unrestrained imagination of a UFO enthusiast, but a description found in one of the oldest texts of humanity, the book of the prophet Ezekiel. For more than 2,000 years, scientists, theologians, researchers, and simply curious people have been asking the same question: what did this prophet actually see on the banks of the Chebar River? Was it truly a divine vision, or do we have before us an ancient but surprisingly accurate description of contact with extraterrestrial intelligence? Now let us add another, far more unexpected twist to this mystery. What if similar accounts of celestial chariots and wheels of fire are found not only in the Bible, but also in ancient Russian sources, in the oral traditions of our ancestors, and in legends that have come down to us through the centuries under the cover of myths and fairy tales? What if our distant forebears, the Rus, also saw something similar, recorded it in the language of symbols and images, and passed it down to us through generations, hoping that one day we would understand the true meaning of their messages? Today we will embark on a journey that will connect heaven and earth, ancient chronicles and modern hypotheses, sacred texts and inexplicable artifacts, to try to unravel one of the most striking mysteries hidden in the shadows of biblical lines and Slavic legends. This is the theory that the Bible, as well as ancient Russian sources, contains encoded descriptions of spaceships that came from distant stars, and that contacts with alien civilizations were not rare, but almost a common occurrence for our most ancient ancestors. Many of us are used to perceiving the Bible exclusively as a sacred text, as a source of moral truths and spiritual guidance. But what if something more is hidden behind its lines? A map of ancient knowledge? Evidence of encounters with the unknown, encrypted in the language of metaphors and symbols? Let us return to that very moment we mentioned at the very beginning, the vision of the prophet Ezekiel. This is how it is described in the book. He sees a formidable cloud approaching from the north, surrounded by fire, and in the middle of this cloud are four creatures with the faces of a man, a lion, an ox, and an eagle, and above their heads is something resembling a crystal, and above this crystal is something like a throne on which sits a figure like a man, illuminated by fire and light. But the most amazing thing is that under each of these creatures is a wheel full of eyes, rotating without effort, moving in any direction without turning, but always following the creatures. This wheel is described with such technical detail and such clarity that modern researchers see in it not just a fruit of the imagination, but a description of a complex mechanism, perhaps even a flying machine. Ezekiel says that the sound from these wheels was like thunder, and everything around was filled with a brightness like the appearance of lightning. Does this not remind you of descriptions by UFO eyewitnesses in our time? Is it possible that the very ships that appear today in the sky over Texas, Arizona, or Siberia were noticed in Antiquity, only then they were called the Chariots of God? And this is not the only example. In the book of Genesis, we read about how angels descended from heaven and entered into physical relations with the daughters of men, giving birth to a race of giants, the Nephilim. In the book of Judges, the angel of the Lord ascends on the altar in fire, and the flame carries him upward. In the book of Kings, the prophet Elijah is carried away in a chariot of fire to the heavens. Each of these episodes can be interpreted literally as a miracle, but it can also be interpreted differently, as an encounter with technology so advanced that for an ancient person it could have seemed divine. It is precisely such a view, a look through the prism of possible extraterrestrial intervention, that lies at the heart of one of the most discussed theories of modern times, known as the ancient astronaut hypothesis. The ancient astronaut hypothesis, first systematically formulated in the middle of the 20th century, suggests that alien civilizations visited Earth in the distant past, sharing knowledge, technology, and even genetic material with people. This theory, of course, causes a stormy reaction, both among scientists, who call it pseudoscientific, and among believers, who see in it an insult to the sanctity of the scriptures. But let us for a moment set aside prejudices and look at things differently. What if ancient people simply did not have the words to describe what they saw? What if, faced with a flying craft controlled by beings in strange clothes, possessing the ability to heal, fly, and communicate through unknown devices, they called them gods, angels, and heavenly mentors? After all, for a person of the Stone Age, even a modern smartphone would seem like magic, would it not? And if today we perceive technology as something commonplace, for an ancient person, any complex machine would be a miracle. That is why, perhaps, there are so many chariots of fire, heavenly thrones, and shining beings in biblical texts. These are not metaphors, but an attempt to describe what was seen in a language accessible to the consciousness of that time. And here, another incredibly intriguing turn arises. What if such descriptions are not limited only to the Bible? What if similar evidence can be found in ancient Russian sources, in chronicles, epics, icons, and even architecture? After all, the Slavic peoples living in the vast expanses from the Baltic to Chernigov also had their myths about celestial chariots, firebirds, and gods descending from heaven. Perhaps it is these parallels that will help us find the key to understanding what actually happened on our planet in those distant times. If we turn to ancient Russian chronicles, especially to the so-called heavenly signs, we will find many descriptions strikingly reminiscent of modern UFO observations. In the Novgorod First Chronicle for the year 1134, it is recorded, "They saw a great sign in the sky, like a great star, and a flame coming from it." The Ipatiev Chronicle mentions how in the year 1271 a great star appeared in the sky in the east, and it was like a sword having a flame. And in the year 1322, according to the Pskov Second Chronicle, they saw the sky open up, and they saw something like a wheel, fiery, spinning, and a great voice coming from it. Does this sound like a description of an ordinary meteor or comet? Or perhaps it is something more? Note the repeating motif, the wheel, the flame, the loud voice, the tearing of the heavens. These details do not just coincide with Ezekiel's descriptions, they are repeated in different cultures, in different parts of the world, in different historical eras. Thus, Japanese chronicles mention flying shields from the time of the Heian dynasty. Indian texts speak of vimanas, capable of moving through the air and even between worlds. And Sumerian cuneiform tablets describe gods descending in heavenly boats. And what about us, the Rus? In our epics, we find mentions of Zmei Goryanich, a three-headed dragon spewing fire and living in the clouds. Does this not resemble a description of a UFO with several glowing elements maneuvering in the atmosphere? And what about the Firebird, whose plumage shines like gold and whose flight is accompanied by crackling and flame? Perhaps it was not a mythical creature, but a flying craft observed by our ancestors and encoded in the image of a fairy tale bird. Even the word for God among Slavic peoples did not originally carry a religious meaning. It meant simply the one who came from above, a being from the heavens. And if you look closely at ancient Slavic icons, especially those depicting the descent of the Holy Spirit in the form of tongues of flame, or the Last Judgment with the opening sky and chariots of fire, you can see not just symbolism, but perhaps an attempt to depict what was seen. After all, icons were painted not according to the artist's fantasy, but strictly in accordance with canons, which in turn could be based on real, albeit distant, memories. Now let us look a little deeper into the very structure of the ancient Russian worldview. Our ancestors lived in a world where the boundaries between heaven and earth, between the physical and the spiritual, were much less clear than they seem to us today. They believed in Yav, Nav, and Prav, three hypostases of existence. Yav is our material world, Nav is the world of the dead, and Prav is the world of higher truths and laws, the world of the gods. The key point here is that Prav was not there behind the clouds in an abstract sense, but was perceived as a real physical place that could be reached if one knew the way. Some legends mention magic ships or boats on which heroes set off to the land of far away, to the kingdom of the white god, or to Svarog himself, the god of heaven. What if these lands far away are not a metaphor, but an indication of distant planets or star systems? After all, according to Slavic cosmology, the world was divided into 9 main spheres, 3 above the earth, 3 on the earth, and 3 under the earth. Each of them had its own name and its own purpose. Could this be why the number 9 sounds so often in Russian epics? Not as a magic number, but as a real indication of a cosmic map passed down to the ancestors. It is also interesting that in old Russian churches, especially in those of Novgorod and Suzdal, images of not just angels, but specifically wheels of fire surrounded by eyes can often be seen on domes and frescoes, just like in Ezekiel. Is this a coincidence, or is it a trace of the fact that through Byzantium, through the Orthodox tradition, the Slavs inherited not only a religion, but also ancient knowledge about celestial ships that reached them from even deeper antiquity? After all, Slavic legends about Svarog, Dajbog, and Perun carry echoes of much older cosmogonic myths, possibly dating back to those times when humanity had not yet divided into nations and cultures, and everyone had a common source of knowledge, the very one that was sent from above. Now let us think about why this topic causes such resistance in official circles. Why do scientists so persistently reject even the very possibility that ancient texts might contain information about contacts with extraterrestrial intelligence? One reason is adherence to a materialistic paradigm, according to which humanity developed strictly linearly, from cavemen to farmers, from farmers to cities, from cities to civilizations. But what if development was not linear? What if there were flashes of knowledge passed from outside that were later lost, forgotten, or disguised as religion? Archaeological finds, such as the spherical stones in Costa Rica, the giant megaliths of Baalbek, the Nazca Plain with its giant geoglyphs that are visible only from the air, all this calls into question traditional chronology. And Russia has its own mysteries too. For example, the Long Stone in the Urals, where artifacts have been found whose age, according to some estimates, exceeds 15,000 years. Or the ancient underground passages under the Kremlin, about which there are legends but which have not been officially investigated. And if we remember that Russian epics often speak of mines that forge themselves, of swords that glow in the dark, of shields that reflect any blows, can we not assume that these objects were created using technologies unavailable to medieval man? It is quite possible that many of the miracles described in the lives of saints or in chronicles had technological rather than a divine nature. It then turns out that the Bible and ancient Russian legends are not just religious or mythological texts, but encoded reports from eyewitnesses, an attempt to preserve the memory of events too amazing to be transmitted directly. After all, if you lived in the 13th century and saw a spaceship, how would you describe it? Most likely as a chariot of the gods or a Firebird. Otherwise, you would simply be considered a madman or a heretic. However, let us return to the biblical Ezekiel, for it was his description that became the starting point for many studies and even reconstructions. In the 1960s, aerospace engineer Nazim Hounek, inspired by the prophet's vision, created a model of the so-called Ezekiel's wheel, a multi-deck aircraft with 4 vertical rotors capable of moving in any direction without turning, as described in the book. This model not only worked, but also received a patent in the United States. It is interesting that Hounek, being a devout man, did not deny the divine nature of the vision, but believed that God could also use technology for his purposes. And similar models of wheels capable of moving in any direction are being actively developed today for Mars rovers and military robots. Is it not strange that an ancient text written 2,500 years ago contains a description that turns out to be so relevant for modern engineering? And if we look into Slavic sources, we find similar descriptions. In the so-called Book of Veles, a controversial but intriguing text that some consider a forgery and others a genuine testament to ancient Slavic writing, heavenly wheels are mentioned on which the gods come to judge the nations. Even if the Book of Veles causes doubt, the very idea of a heavenly wheel is present in other undisputed sources, in rituals, in songs, and in architecture. For example, there is the tradition of rolling wheels of fire on Ivan Kupala Day, a ritual that is still practiced in some villages. A wheel is wrapped in straw, set on fire, and rolled down a hill, symbolizing the sun or a celestial body. But what if this ritual was not originally just symbolic, but reproduced a real event, the arrival of a wheel of fire from the heavens? After all, rituals often preserve the memory of events much longer than written sources. And so we come to the main question: why all this? If alien civilizations really visited Earth, if they left their traces in the Bible and in ancient Russian legends, what was their purpose? Were they mentors, observers, or perhaps even genetic engineers who intervened in human evolution? In the book of Genesis, it says that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and took them as wives. The result of these unions were the Nephilim, giants, people of extraordinary strength and intelligence. Does this look like a genetic experiment? After all, today scientists experiment with DNA, trying to improve human qualities. What if such experiments were already carried out in antiquity, but not by humans, but by beings from other worlds? And if so, then it is possible that traces of this intervention are still preserved in our genetic code, the so-called junk DNA, which science still cannot explain. Slavic peoples also have legends about giants, heroes who could fell an oak tree with one blow or stop a river. Could these be the descendants of those same Nephilim who preserved the genes of the sons of God? And if so, then it is possible that it was from them that the genetic line originated which today makes some people unusually gifted, strong, or intuitively perceptive. Moreover, if we assume that contact with extraterrestrial intelligence did not happen once, but regularly, then we can assume that it continues today, just in a different form. After all, the number of UFO sightings grows every year. Governments of various countries are gradually disclosing secret files, and scientists are increasingly admitting that the universe is too large for us to be alone in it. It then turns out that the Bible and ancient Russian legends are not just stories of the past, but the key to understanding the present and the future. But all this is just theories, hypotheses, assumptions, and that is exactly where their strength lies. They make us think, doubt, and search. They break the usual framework of perception and open the door to a world where nothing is impossible. Perhaps this is the main lesson of the ancient texts, not to believe blindly, but to see beyond the literal meaning, to look into symbols and to listen between the lines. Because truth, like a wheel of fire, does not stand still. It moves, it rotates, revealing new facets to everyone who is ready to search. So is it not time for us, modern people, to stop being afraid of the unknown and start looking at ancient texts not as relics of the past, but as maps of the future, not as dogmas, but as riddles waiting for their solver? After all, each of us is a descendant of those who looked at the sky and saw in it not just stars, but signs, messages, and ships. And maybe it is in us that the memory still lives of those times when the heavens were closer and the gods were more real. So let us not close our eyes to the inexplicable, but on the contrary, become seekers, researchers, and guardians of this ancient memory. Because perhaps it is up to us whether future generations will hear the truth about where we came from, who we really are, and where we are destined to fly next, through the darkness of space, on our own chariots of fire, in search of Prav, the home of those who once came to us from the heavens.